Sega.
Sega already had their name attached to the home ports of Bally Midway's Spy Hunter game in the early 1980s. But in Japan they decided they could improve on the arcade original by adding more vehicles, more upgrades, a needlessly complicated map-based progression system and a difficulty level that would put off almost anyone. As a result, this wasn't terribly well received, but it was called Action Fighter. First, we'll look at the 1986 arcade version, running on Sega System 16A or B hardware. Then we'll look at the 1989 PC-DOS version, which ran both with EGA graphics and had a version optimised for Tandy hardware. It also ran on CGA, but I'm looking at the best looking graphic modes available, rather than the lurid cyan and magenta option. The arcade version was only released in Japan, and there doesn't seem to be any images of the original arcade cabinet on the internet. I suspect it would have been released either in generic units, or maybe Sega's City arcade units as used for Fantasy Zone. The game begins with the various vehicles you'll be using sliding onto screen, before a rolling demo shows each of them in action. Motorbike, car, helicopter, jet ski, and dirt buggy, before the high score table flashes up briefly and the sequence loops again. The first stage begins with the motorbike. Here I'm using infinite lives, as otherwise this would be a very short video. You can accelerate and brake, but as bad guys come at you from above or below, changing speed doesn't often help much. You can't travel too slowly though, or you'll run out of fuel and lose a life. As you race up the screen, helicopters drop various symbols at you, G for gas, and various upgrade icons that activate your various special weapons shown at the bottom of the screen. On the left side of the screen is the level map, which gradually uncovers when you pick up the letter M for map from various gates along the way. This map repeats endlessly, with you rejoining the bottom of the map when you reach the top. The vehicles in the game are varied, but generally handle the same. The motorbike is smaller than the car, with slightly less potent guns. The car, resembling a Corvette Stingray from above, has improved guns but otherwise isn't much different to the bike, though it ends up being a larger target for enemies to collide with. The jet ski allows you to travel to a different location on the map. There's less bad guys here and it's more a case of just avoiding the scenery. The dirt buggy has an ability to jump over scenery items, as long as you've powered up the car with the jump feature. This level has the least bad guys, but feels like it's getting in the way as it's just a transition between sections of the map. The helicopter has 3 separate stages: this island-based stage, a dangerous red canyon stage, and a destroyed city stage. Again, like the jet ski, these are transition stages that let you access different parts of the map in order to collect more M and S symbols. In the bottom right corner of the screen is a count of how many S or special icons you've collected. Again, these are collected from gates along the way. When you collect all 8, your vehicles will be fully upgraded with weapons, and you'll also be able to pass a gateway to destroy the enemy base and complete the stage. This took me nearly an hour to do, and hundreds of lives. You'll then be rewarded with this message: a cartoon girl on a bike. Then start the next stage, which looks very similar to the first one. Overall, this game is both extremely hard and on occasion viciously unfair, and doesn't really play much better than Spy Hunter despite the additions and changes. It does have some pretty catchy tunes though, so have a listen with some gameplay footage. The PC-DOS version released in 1989 by Sega themselves, though it was published by various other third parties in different parts of the world. It's support of the Sega Master System version of the game, which is radically different to the arcade, as we're about to see. As mentioned, the PC-DOS version supported CGA, which we're not going to look at as it looks rubbish. The best looking version is the EGA version, which I'm playing here, but the game also supports Tandy hardware with lower resolution graphics but better audio, which you can now see here. The EGA version begins with a picture of the car, which seems to be a Porsche 911. You then see the controls and, interestingly, a speed option. Speed level 1 is particularly jerky, as you can see here. I'll be playing instead with speed level 4, which is nice and fast, like the original arcade. The game begins with a briefing, before an opening motorbike stage, much like the arcade, but it plays like a complete Spy Hunter clone. You can tell this when, instead of receiving dropped power-ups from helicopters, you instead drive Knight Rider style into a Sega branded truck in order to upgrade your firepower. During the game, you'll collect letters that roll down the road. When you collect letter D, your bike will become a car. Unlike the arcade though, you can transform back and forth by pressing T on the keyboard, which is a bit weird. Once you collect up to level F, your car transforms, much like the Thunderhawk car from 1980's cartoon Mask, into a flying car. This is a much longer stage where you shoot down floating mines, missiles, planes, helicopters and airships. Various power-ups will appear, giving you more time, a smart bomb and so on. Plus you can dock with a large blue helicopter to upgrade your weapons. Eventually, if you're successful, you'll make it to the end of level boss, here 3 submarines. Once you destroy them, you'll get a new mission and start stage 2, which has some changes to the scenery and increased difficulty. Let's now look at the Tandy version. The game is notably lower resolution and looks a lot like the 8-bit Amstrad CPC home computer port. The game plays exactly the same, but as the sprites are bigger and chunkier, it can sometimes be a bit easier, but also sometimes a bit harder to see what's going on. The opening motorbike and car stage looks more colourful. The flying stage is colourful too, but feels more cramped than the EGA version. Bullets from bad guys are red here though, which makes them easier to see than the grey bullets on the EGA version. I didn't manage to get to the end of level boss on this version though. Now for some gameplay, without me talking over it, so you can hear the different sound effects in this version. The arcade and DOS versions are both very different, but they have some situations we can compare. First, here's the opening bike stage on the arcade. Let's wipe across to the PC EGA version. You can see it's very different. Wiping across to the Tandy version, you can see how much chunkier and more colourful it is, although it's a bit easier to see what's what due to the darker road colour. Next, here's the arcade version with the car. The car mostly runs on dusty roads, but here it's in a damaged city location. Let's wipe over to the EGA version and it's pretty different, much more like Spy Hunter. And here's the Tandy version that's even more chunky. Finally, here's the arcade helicopter stage. Wiping across to the EGA version with its flying car, it's very colourful. Next, Let's wipe to the Tandy version, and it's actually harder to work out what's going on due to the lightness of the ocean. Let's compare the 3 stages that are similar between the arcade and DOS version: the bike, car, and flying stage. Action Fighter is far from a classic Sega game. The arcade version is painfully difficult and rather convoluted with its complicated endless map, while the PC-DOS port feels just like a remake of Spy Hunter. Personally, I prefer the DOS version as it's weirdly more arcade than the arcade original, although both versions, like the original Spy Hunter, get repetitive quickly. If you like this comparison of Action Fighter, give it a like. Or subscribe, ring the bell, transform into a range of vehicles and die 100 times. The next game I'll be looking at is my favourite Sega arcade game of all time.